So this is kind of our epilogue, and I think we're going to skip introductions because this may be connected to the previous video, editing-wise, even if it isn't. I think we're in
if we are, look at the other one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're wondering who the heck these guys are, then how did you land on the epilogue video without having watched the rest of the segments?
I was editing the pandemic one today. We don't introduce ourselves in that one, and that's the first one that David's in.
Oh well.
Excellent.
Well, hopefully, constant viewers, so to speak, if you have made your way to the second video in the series, you actually got there from the Well Played site anyway. But here we are, and we're going to wrap up our discussion, retrospecting Well Played, through a little bit of live discourse. But first, I want to share Loop Hero with you. Neither of you has played it yet, and I think it will provide a good ferment for our discussion.
Yeah, I'm finding that so in all the other ones that we've done so far, I had sort of an idea in my head what we would be talking about and what we would be seeing and all this other stuff, right? I find that I have no idea what we're about to do because I haven't seen the game Loop Hero.
Yeah, right. Excellent.
Right.
It's an interesting position to be in, so I'm excited.
Sort of exciting,
Excellent.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let me click the share key. Oh, wait a second here. Yeah, this is going to be annoying, but can I get to the share settings after I've done this?
Yeah, you can in the top. In the little menu bar thingy.
If you can't unshare and reshare, there are some settings like that.
Right. I want to do that only because here we are. Here's the Loop Hero load screen. And normally you would hear this kind of fade in as the game launches. The audio design is actually really pretty essential in this game. Not essential. You can play the game without the audio. And I am actually going to bring down the music, the lovely retro, 8-bit-esque music.
I like it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's really compelling. It's got a bunch of different music that plays over the course of the game, but I'm actually going to phase it out. I'm going to leave the effects up. So I haven't technically finished Loop Hero yet. So we're going to select a new save slot. And I think we should probably retain the tutorial, though. So we're going to do that.
Okay.
And this is, from my perspective, this is kind of an interesting point regarding the well-played experience anyway.
It's interesting. I think there's probably still an ongoing debate about whether tutorials are or should be a part of the game experience.
I would be inclined to agree with that.
Or at least the well-played game experience, right?
From my perspective, it really depends on the tutorial.
Right. I mean, I think it's more of a question for designers and how designers incorporate it than, how to think about it as a player.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I do appreciate ones where the introduction to the story also happens as you're being introduced to how to play.
Right.
And perhaps that is actually particularly relevant in this case, and why I decided, yeah, let's keep the tutorial.
All right, so the emphasis on, I don't know a lot about this, but the emphasis on doing something before it's too late in something called Loop Hero is interesting, right?
Absolutely. There's certainly other games that have touched on that or kind of gone into that. We've referenced Groundhog's Day previously.
Yeah, you said other games, and there are. I mean, in fact, it's an essential part of gameplay often, and we can talk about that later. But all sorts of media have kind of addressed this looping reality possibility.
Absolutely.
This is so intentionally retro.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. The game did emerge out of a game jam. I still haven't read the article I was meaning to read about this. And it emerged out of a game jam that was actually kind of like, hey, what happens if we, or at least the premise I understand is what happens if we smash the mechanics together, and see if we can make them work. Which one of them is a deck building mechanic. So here we are, without space, without time, without memories. And here's our protagonist. Is this legible to you?
Somewhat.
So where am I? I can't see anything except this path. My head is killing me. I remember only a skeleton with a staff in the sky. This darkness was coming from him. Did he destroy everything around here? Just standing here won't do me any good, I guess. So now the game is giving us our tutorial notion here that you can switch between planning when looping is stopped and adventure. And notice that I'm in double speed over here right now. There's not much point in playing this game in single speed. So hope I'll be able to find some shelter before nightfall, if such a thing as a night still even exists without a sky, of course.
Why do they have regular speed then? And why didn't they just make double speed regular speed?
I think that when you're first learning it, it's maybe not too bad to go in single speed, but it's one of those games where once you kind of get the knack of it at all, there's really a continue on your journey by changing the game mode. Oh, right. And it's letting me know I could use space or the mouse. And here I am going to encounter a living ball of slime. It's quite a nuisance, and they digest anything they can.
Pretty gross.
I remember this creature. Maybe I just need to freshen up my memory and everything will go back to normal. We, as the audience/player, know that this can't possibly be correct. So traveling, fighting, and most other actions are done automatically. Now, since this is a tutorial, it is now walking me through, hey, here's a weapon that fell off of this mob. Notice you have an inventory and you have item slots, and the item slots are specific. So go ahead and drag your weapon to the item. Now here it starts getting interesting. I think I remember that there was a grove nearby. Are these even my memories, or do they belong to that slime? And now we're introducing the other primary mechanics. So you're managing inventory and you're managing cards that get dealt in down here, which make up the environment. And it's telling you to put the grove here.
Okay.
So this card is on the path, on the loop. Notice how slow I am walking at single speed. It's really, really quite the trudge. So, double speed, a little better.
Do they have more than double speed?
Sadly, no. There are times where it might be nice to have more than double speed. Forest rat wolf. I was right. Some emotional stress, a few colorful images, and a bit of adrenaline, and everything will be forgotten like a bad dream. Or remembered as a bad, damn, it's good that nobody's listening. So you can get new items and cards during battle. And so it's given me, as I mouse over things, I can see stats, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I can see more than stats. So notice as I'm mousing over these cards, got rock. Its magnificent appearance gives you strength. It's letting me know that it has game effects, +2 HP and +2 more HP for every adjacent rock or mountain. And forest, a thick forest, nobody knows who or what could be lurking inside it. Makes you a bit nervous. +1% hero attack speed. So I'll go ahead and I'll place this rock somewhere. And I'll place this forest somewhere else. And notice these can't go on the path, right? It's letting me know pretty clearly.
Yeah.
And so
not path things, huh?
Yeah, they are not path things. And then, I can see that this has a much better, much better. It has one point better damage range. And it gives me the vampirism effect at 9%.
Oh.
So there was a mountain over there, and here's a forest, and the world is just like new. The branches and stones in my backpack are a sure sign of that.
And that it replaced your old sword.
It did. My old sword is gone. It is calling my attention to the backpack up here, letting me know that I've collected some resources. Stable wood, a log that somehow managed to keep its structural integrity despite the general chaos, and preserved rock, apparently untouched by the Lich's curse. We suddenly know that there's a Lich. We kind of got the idea before. And thus suitable for building despite the shapelessness of the world. This is something I actually really love about this game, is that it does kind of storytelling. A lot of the storytelling is done through, I hesitate to call it environmental storytelling, but game detail, inventory storytelling is actually a huge amount of it. The descriptions on items and in your stuff helps inform you as much as the dialogue does, even though the dialogue, obviously, when it happens, is important. So,
would you say not be helpful, but it reminds me of a little cultist sim.
I haven't played that, actually.
Okay.
Do you need to read the details in order to be able to progress or whatever? Are there certain things where you wouldn't know unless you had read the details?
I would say so. Most of them, you're going to catch the mouse over stuff that's going to tell you what you need to know to, gameplay wise. And there are some things that are kind of, I guess I'd call it emergent, right? you put things in certain places and you get behaviors that don't happen when you just place a tile by itself, right? But as far as the narrative progression part of it, there are some things that, certainly in terms of the depth of the narrative, that you wouldn't get if you weren't reading those details.
Okay.
So it's telling me the game itself is a journey on a looped path. Only you will decide when it's time for the hero to return to the camp. Either you or the fangs and claws of your enemies. Of course, you can retreat almost any time, but a special animation will let you know when it's safer to do so. So if I click here now, I have the option to retreat and keep all of my resources. Under other circumstances, which we'll see shortly, you can stay on the path. I'm going to go ahead and retreat because it's going to kick us basically out of, well, through the end of the tutorial here. It's cold and dark here. A small fire can solve both these problems.
Even though the camp appears to be on the path, that's just access to it.
Well, it will be shortly. So I haven't built a campfire yet, right?
Okay.
So there's the build button here, and the campfire just requires 1 stone and 1 wood.
Conveniently gave you.
Which it gave me conveniently. Have you played A Dark Place? I recommend that as well, and it also has a lot of resonance with our conversation. It's far more of a roguelike than this is, although both of them are more roguelite.
Is that the text game, or am I thinking of something else?
It is a browser-based game. There is an app version of it as well. And it's not it's not a text adventure.
Okay.
It's a clicker. I don't know if you played the paperclip game. Or Candy Box, or whatever the name of the Candy Seller one was, but like those games, it's a clicker game that builds itself out as you go. And notice this game also builds itself out as you go. So I've got 2 menu items, and you've got very faint. I'm not sure if you can see them through the screen share. Kind of areas where it looks like there should be more menu items going on over here, right?
Right.
So click anywhere to complete the tutorial. Great. Yeah, I can click here. I can get my details. It tells me that the hero restores 20% of my max HP on entering the campsite. It also has some nice description. So let's start an expedition. So now this is the regular expedition menu screen. It's not telling me much except it's letting me start. So the path, everything is wrong, but I remember. It looks like a completely different place, and it's empty again. Do my actions have any meaning? Question that we regularly ask ourselves as game scholars. Like I have a choice, a statement we regularly make ourselves as game scholars. If I need to give up and try to save the world, I'm the worst savior of all. Let's do it.
So this path was randomly generated?
Yes, the path is random each time.
Okay.
All right. So it just gave me some stuff, and I'm going to place it in a moment. But that happened a little fast, so you can see I've got a mountain, a vampire mansion. That's new. Mountain and rock are, notice the mountain literally says it's like a rock, but really big. So it has a better bonus than the rock does. The grove, which again goes on the path, and then meadow. It gives me some meadow. Meadow heals 2 hit points at the start of each day, and it is earth covered with a thick carpet of grass. Nothing really interesting unless you're a cow, of course. So let's go ahead and put the vampire mansion out. It has this fantastic sound where the vampire is laughing. And I, as a force of habit, always put my rock up in the corner over here. And put the grove out over a little further. I really should have put that mansion somewhere else, only to hasten the gameplay along. Mountain, and that's a nice little pause while I do that. As you can see, I grab resources whenever I pass through a relevant road tile. And another grove.
Is there a reason you're spreading them out?
There is, actually. Pause for a second. So first of all, I've got a ring. It apparently does plus 10% counter. And you can see I've only got a few of these inventory slots that are actually highlighted. It's a mystery. Why do I have these other slots? What are they for? I don't know yet. And 2 of them appear to be broken. What's that about? I'm still not sure, actually. So the main reason being, I don't know if we're going to get far enough in this particular quick run, but as you go through each loop, things get tougher. And you really don't want too many enemies to stack up. You'll notice that the grove spawns a rat wolf every 2 days. You got a day timer that's running up here. So every time it hits the top, the cock crows. and whatever the events are that are triggered by stuff goes.
Right.
So meanwhile, here I've got a treasury. The thick walls guard all kinds of riches from thieves and previous owners. It gives a random resource after placing anything on an adjacent tile. And it can't be built adjacent to anything, so you notice it doesn't let me build it adjacent to anything. I'll drop it down here, and I'm going to take these meadows, and there you go. It's giving me some resources. And actually, just for a point of reference, notice this meadow it still counts as adjacent, but this one had an effect because it was placed directly adjacent to it, not diagonal. So it is a blooming meadow, and it heals 3 hit points at the start of each day, where this one is just a regular meadow. And around the loop we go. Also, yeah, I can mouse over things in combat too. It'll pause the combat and let me learn some more about what's going on here. It lets me know what its damage and attacks per second are. And in this case, it has some qualities. It is artificial life and liquid.
I can definitely see a purpose for a 4 times speed.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's too slow. I'm just, there's stuff where you're not really interacting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. No, part of it was making a passive runner game, right? That was part of what they were thinking about in terms of the concept of this game.
Okay.
But the one thing I'll say in relation to that is that as you progress through loops, it promptly becomes pretty clear. So here we go. These are both level 1 rings. Do I want to keep my 10% counter, or do I want to take the counter down to 7% and get 6% vampirism?
Vampirism.
Why not? So you can see that little 1 there. I'm getting a tiny little bit of health back on each attack, as one might predict, with a trait called vampirism. I'm busy building my mount.
Most other games, then stacking vampirism is a good idea.
Mostly stacking anything is a good idea.
Right.
So you can see I got most of my health back on that. Oh, and I picked up a shield. Very nice. Oh, good. Stay over there, slime. Ah, excellent. So, back off, human. A vampire. Where are your lands? If your farmers need help, I would be glad to offer it. Now, this is different. Not what you normally expect when encountering a vampire. No more lands, no more flock, only hundreds of years of emptiness. And hundreds of years of hunger. Save yourself while you still can. I don't know how long I will be able to keep my head straight. What hundreds of years are you talking about? Your mind is easy to trick, but you can't trick my hunger. Of course not. It demands its share. Every sip, every drop of blood will go to satiate it. I'm too weak, but you can help me, and I will set this crumbled world right. Right? I'm doing this not for just myself, but for everyone in the name of good. So be grateful for my hard work, and just let me bleed you dry. Obviously, that's not happening. But clearly the vampire is a significantly tougher foe. So vampires often owned lands. They kept the peace and helped their settlements to prosper, but this won't do it all. Now they're just pale shadows of their former selves, both physically and mentally. Apparently, the blood of other creatures can't sustain them. He wasn't joking about the hunger. Even the creatures that stand near him are imbued with the power to devour someone else's life. And you'll see we're in a, in the radius, which is typical of path adjacent tiles, cards, whatever, it has a 3 tile radius around it essentially. Which, like, if I mouse over it, you'll actually see what it's affecting here.
Sure.
And hey, there's some new stuff here. There's a new sword. It's not better.
So if you had wanted to, you could have put the mansion down at the bottom right, and it would have triggered 8 tiles or 7 tiles.
Oh, if I'd put it down over
6 tiles.
Well, no, because if you look at it, it's literally got a radius around it like this. Oh, if I'd put it like
on the internal,
yeah, absolutely. It could pull a vampire up on all of those tiles. So what I've got here is an Oblivion card, a bit of the Lich's magic, which causes anything to be totally forgotten. It erases any established tile, and it erases monsters from the road. Usually reserved for emergencies. Right. A beacon, which it describes as a worthless landmark in a world with no direction. So it does, in fact, increase movement speed by 40% within its range, and it does a 20% attack speed for all units. So it really doesn't help you, but it is helpful in terms of moving things along. Then I've got a spider cocoon, a silky bastion of 8-legged hunters, and it spawns a spider on an adjacent tile once a day. I don't know. I can put it more or less anywhere, obviously. I don't want to put it too close to stuff. How about this corner? No reason not to. And obviously, I'm going to keep building out around my treasury here, because it's the obvious thing to do. It keeps rewarding me, so why wouldn't I? And something kind of cool that I think the game does, this encounter with, since this loot came off of the encounter with the vampire, you can look at it, the armor looks like it's got a little bit of a vampire style to it, and it carries 8% vampirism on it, plus 2 damage to all. Great. And the rest of the stuff I'm going to leave in the inventory for now.
Okay. Is there at some point a way to clear the inventory of stuff you don't want?
Yes and no. The inventory will, in fact, start clearing itself out, and it's advantageous when it does. And we'll probably play just long enough to get there. All right, here's another moment.
Oh.
So now I have over here a mountain peak.
So there's a whole collecting like things together theme.
There is. There definitely is. So let's see. These are both plain armor. One thing that's kind of sad in this game is like this level 2 armor has cool features, but this level 3 armor just has higher maximum hit points, and it's just the better bet. But I'll find other stuff. So a road lantern is also going to speed things up a little bit. Now let's put it down here, kind of maximize that corner.
Wow.
Things are really kind of trucking along now, which again, so here.
So you actually placed one over the other one. Is that right?
The meadow here?
Uh-huh.
No, that was completing the one empty corner.
Oh, okay,
here.
got it.
So notice the treasury is now empty.
Got it.
And now it will spawn a gargoyle every 3 days. Also of note, because we haven't seen it yet, and I didn't notice this the first time I was playing, that there was the text here that would have told me this, but this spawns a harpy every 2 days. And it gets plus 5 HP for every adjacent mountain or rock. So obviously I want to put more rocks around the rock here. But what happened when I did that? Every time you get 10 mountain or rock tiles, you get a goblin camp. So, pesky little jerks. Let's get this other spider out here, not too close to the other one. And onward. Quick evaluation of the weapons here. This has regen on it. This is a spear, which has counter, which is typical of spears. And I don't have anything. Oh, this shield happens to be one better than the other one. Yeah, good enough. There you can see this harpy. Right in my path. No. What do you mean, no? You want to save the world? You want to ask for help? Our answer is no. How did you... But why no? We see far away. We see deep inside. For a long time, there has been just emptiness instead of the sky. But it doesn't stop us from seeing. Your saving of the world is one-sided and naive. Each person sees their own way of saving the world. That's why no one will ever join you. Fine, I don't fully understand it, but tell me your version. What does to save the world mean to you? My progeny and my kin, for them to be strong and to live. It's part of the cycle of life and death. It is life itself. It is the world. I will kill you and feed your remains to my starving younglings. And life will go on. And how many lives does your blade give birth to by killing again and again? So this game gets me because I'm like, when my buddy Paul recommended that I start this game, the last thing I expected was that it was going to have any kind of like, reflections of a philosophical nature going on. Only one. So I don't want you or your children to die from starvation. Please try to see reason. If my mission succeeds, harpies can have all the sky and all the hunting grounds they need. I can't feed my children with your beautiful words. It's time to say goodbye. And combat proceeds in the usual manner. And I get a better spear. I feel awful. By fixing one evil, I'm becoming a source of another. There's no home for harpies except the highest mountains. But there's no food there. I can't imagine how they managed to survive if their mountains were cut from reality. So I'm just really going to quickly drop the spear in here. So as a level 3 spear, it's not quite as powerful as the sword and raw damage, but it gives me some defense and counter, so why not?
2 enemies.
Indeed, there's a
I've
slime.
had that since the vampire, right?
Yep. At this point, it's just a question of how much stuff is spawning on the road. I'll go ahead and put the cemetery down here, too. Why not? Voila, 3 enemies. And it's a little bit annoying because the vampire gives his vampirism effect to them, which is going to draw the fight out marginally in this case. It's early game. It's not trying to punish me yet.
You don't have any control over the order of attack?
None whatsoever. Everything happens, automatically. So I've got another treasury. I've got some more meadows. I might as well just continue doing this. Otherwise, I would normally, well, just for example, because we're not going to play this through. Otherwise, if I don't have another spot, once I discovered that meadows bloom when you put them next to things, I'll put it next to something else, and it gives you different resources depending on what you put it next to, which is kind of nifty. A much better shield. And it is, it does nicely sum up your stats down here, so you don't need to kind of mouse over everything to see where you're at. It's pretty elegant design.
Well, I may be buying it later.
This wasn't a sales pitch, and yet. Yeah, what I'm going to do is run this loop, and then I might actually die in a moment. We're going to see how this goes.
Quite a few enemies on the road ahead of you here. Yeah.
No, because of these guys. They're nasty. Stop, says the goblin. Where do these goblins come from? I don't remember remembering you. We remembered ourselves. Now give us all you've got. You have no idea what's going on, right? Why don't you help me restore order in this world first? Then you can do anything you want. Goblin must rob. I'm sorry, goblin must rob. No other order in the world. Fair enough. Guess I don't have any valid objection here. And I like this about our hero, too, is that, previously we have, you've killed the harpy. It's a feel-bad moment. The hero literally is like, I feel bad. But they're not like a lawful good, morally true and straight line here, right? Okay, you are who you are. I guess we're going to fight then. Oh, wait, I do have one. How about combat? So you can see,
saved you there.
They have a quick attack speed, right? And they have a rage effect, which enrages after an ally dies. And no, the goblins didn't take me down. Yeah, they gave me a really nice ring, actually, which I'll promptly equip.
I think the counter might have saved you there a bit.
It probably did, yeah. Although I've got a fair amount left. I mean, I'm at 322 out of 747.
Okay.
It's strange how these creatures appear here on their own. Maybe it means everything is actually not so bad and that the world is trying to restore itself. Our hero is optimistic at times. Or that even the apocalypse isn't enough to get rid of some pests. Our hero is realistic at times. Got another vampire mansion. I'll go ahead and... Oops. I've got another 4 ring. So you were asking, actually, no, I'm going to leave this here so we can see what happens. You're asking about managing inventory, and notice that when you get new stuff added when it's full, things disappear, but they produce resources up in your bag up here. So you get more stuff kind of accruing back to you.
They disappear in some logical order?
Whatever's at the bottom goes. So if you want to save something, then, kind of want to snag it beforehand. Yeah. I don't think so. Can I? David, I've actually never tried doing that before.
Oh, okay. It may not be important. I mean, you either want it or you don't. So,
well, alternatively, I'm going to drop this down here since I don't want either of these particular rings. Am I sure I don't want the 19% counter ring? What's my counter at? Yeah, actually, I'm going to stack counter. Because the more valuable stuff should render into better goods up here, basically. And because we're kind of closing out here, just make sure everything's on the road. I gotta tell you, when I had the opportunity to take spiders out of the rotation, which is something that will happen, it's definitely high on the list. I was like, screw these spiders. Kind of brutal, because they spawn with enough frequency to... it can get really dense with spiders. You can wind up with just quite a lot of spiders.
You're not even determining who you attack, right?
No, you don't even get that choice. Like,
Okay.
yeah. It really just runs most of it for you. Oh, yep, more goblins. And now, since I'm back on the home tile, if I'd left the road before, I would have only kept 60% of my stuff. If you die, you only get to keep 30% of your stuff. The thought of leaving the battlefield and going back to your cozy camp has passed through your mind. What a timely idea. And it's a great time to retreat to camp so that I can demo this piece here. I can't believe it. Hey, everybody, the boy has managed to return. Survivors, does this mean I'm not alone anymore? Where did you come from? Is there still a place without darkness? We don't know where we came from, or we can't remember. These people you see are only a small part of what's left of the group, I think. You're not sure? We're not sure. We reached that conclusion because of the abandoned luggage and leftover daily rations. With each day, new signs of presence of people that, as far as everyone here knows, have never even been with us. It's like we forgot them. You forgot? Exactly. It's like people disappear every day, and we instantly forget they even existed, almost as if we forgot the place we came from, and our families, and maybe even ourselves. My name is Yota. That's the part I still remember. Nobody else's memory is in much better shape. I did not remember this character's name until now, so I forget to. That's why I remember so little about myself. Everything is forgotten. But wait, you said that I'd managed to return. That means you remembered I was here. Yes, that's why it's so important to us. We saw you leave, but you were gone before we could approach you. Listen, we can't wander around in this emptiness anymore. There's a campfire and a few sleeping bags here. Luxury in these dark times. What do you say? Oh, of course, I'd be very grateful if we could team up. I want to restore everything. I've begun to remember the world as it was before. But there's no point to it without other people. It's too lonely without them. So remembering the world, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm too exhausted, but we'd be glad if you could help us, and we'd be glad to help you. Just don't ask us to go with you. I don't know how you managed to return, but for us, leaving the group is too dangerous. I will ask no such thing of you. For now, I just want to have a place to return to, a place where I can hear other people's voices. So here we are in, oh, we weren't joking about helping you. Here are the few things that survived the cataclysm and don't vanish away, can't be forgotten. Take them, you might need them. So from the campfire, I got some stuff that goes to my goods down here. And notice the menu is in fact building out. I've got all important stats, letting me know everything that I've killed, tiles placed, etc., resources acquired. And the build function. I have a campfire, and I have the resources. I do not have resources to make the herbalist's hut or the smithy, or anything else in this delightful tree that I don't have access to yet, but I can make a field kitchen. And of course, I'll place it, right next to any of my 4 slots, right? Do you know the difference between a good cook and a bad cook? The food made by a good cook is tastier. What, you're waiting for something more elaborate? Sometimes the truth is very simple. Look, I have a cauldron, a hearth, a couple of knives, a bucket of potatoes, 3 onions, and some ham. Nothing special. Everything is very simple, and yet for some reason this is making me hungry. But give me a few minutes, and everyone in this camp will be running to my table, following the tasty smells of a good stew. So now you can see, I've got the expedition button, and it's showing me something here too, right? The game is in fact also a deck builder, and I have unlocked the Bloodgrove card, and I can see that I've got a deck max of 12, a deck min of 7, and that each of these categories has maximums and minimums as well. So I can add Bloodgrove. If I wanted to get rid of the spiders right now, I could remove them. I wouldn't get any spider cocoons on my path, and so on. So there's the deck building part in Expedition. There's nothing else that's evident to me right now in terms of there will be other things on the screen. Spoiler: other things on the screen will change eventually, just like other menu items will appear here eventually. But I can go and I can check out some details about these things. It's letting me know that building my field kitchen gave me plus 10% to the campfire's healing power, and that it unlocked Bloodgrove. And I could try to level it up, but I don't have all the resources needed to upgrade it. If I did, it would increase my campfire's healing power further. I'm mousing over my resources down here. Oops, if I don't do that, I can see kind of what these things are. This is a metamorphosis. It's the world's ability to change and transform was carefully detached from its existence, put into an orb and destroyed. It's nice that it isn't irreversible. So you get the idea. This, in a nutshell, is Loop Hero. The catch is that you tend to die a lot. It is definitely roguelite. When you die, you lose, 70% of your stuff. that has a little bit more, slightly heftier consequences later in the game for certain reasons that I will not disclose because I have a suspicion one or both of you will wind up playing it. And this level, get back here in whatever, 15, 20 minutes.
You lose 70% of what you've gained so far, or 70% of what you gained on that.
What you're carrying on that loop, which is what makes it very much roguelite. Right. It wants you to continue building and to continue kind of building out these resources.
Well, it wants the story to continue, which is kind of cool.
Exactly. And the story will continue, and there are bosses in this game eventually, and it handles them quite elegantly, far more so than I again, the game has more depth than it suggests. And for something as innocuous as an auto runner going around a loop, it manages to be kind of increasingly compelling as you unlock it. And I mentioned the clicker games. It definitely, I think, at least indirectly draws influence from clicker games in that. A lot of games do increasing complexity, but this game does increasing complexity in a way that's a lot like a clicker. In that, clickers also tend to auto run, and you can, up the speed a little bit if you want to, but the game pretty much just runs itself. And so then, like what you're doing really comes into the various elements that it introduces as the game progresses. When you have kind of these moments for a choice that'll impact how the next run goes. And I guess the part that really doesn't feel like an auto runner is that you've defined what's going to be spawning out of your deck. And it's going to keep serving you cards, and you're going to make choices about how to build out both the path and the rest of the resources on the map, some of which matter more than others. Some of the resource placement is pretty arbitrary. I almost always put a mountain up in the upper left-hand corner. Does it have to be there? No. Putting it in a corner does seem like a good idea, given that, rock and mountain stack, but you get the idea.
Is it a strictly single-player game?
It is a strictly single-player game.
Because, in a lot of clicker games, like I'm thinking of Facebook games, you get bonus time or actions or whatever with friends and stuff, right?
Yeah, or I should say, at least at this point, it's a strictly single player game. I don't know whether or not they might, in fact, they have, I think, released at least one patch of it already. So who knows if they'll add features as time goes on. But currently, where the game stands, it's definitely a single player game. It's been intimated to me that it's a game where beating it once does incentivize you to potentially start another playthrough. I don't know why, having not quite beaten it yet. But that's a little bit of context. And a couple of things that I'm gonna close this out here. So.
Well, before you do, if you're throwing this away anyway, if you are, start another day just to see what a new day looks like.
Oh, sure.
You mind?
No, not at all.
Or start another
expedition. Loop. Go back. Yeah. It is starting another day. So as you can see,
so new randomly generated loop. None of the stuff exists, and all your equipment is.
All my equipment is gone. Okay. I don't get any of the gear.
Yeah.
Back to fighting slimes to try and eke out what I can, and so I got a battlefield that wasn't there before.
Yeah. So things change, but you start from the same point more or less, and you're kind of building up each time. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's all.
that's what you were looking for. Excellent.
That's what I was looking for. Yep.
All right.
It was kind of implied, but I wanted to see it.
Actually, I should probably stop the share before I exit. Only because, who knows with the vagaries of software what might happen, especially as I think I noted something about the way that this is done on Mac. Every time I intentionally quit out of this, it goes, hey, this quit unexpectedly. Like, this is like how Adobe software will give you that crashes on quit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, the software has crashed. No, it didn't. I told it to close. What happened in your shutdown procedure that caused you to decide it was a crash? So
what? Yeah. I've got I guess a couple high level questions. What makes this game good?
Yeah.
It's a good game, right? It seems fun. What makes it good?
It's a really good question. I think so. One thing about this game that I think is worth highlighting, and in terms of kind of informing this current moment, is we are now 2 decades or more into retro games, right? Maybe 2 decades. I feel like 2 decades feels like about right. Somewhere around 2000. Right. It started to be cool to make games that were intentionally, lower resolution.
Just to do the math, we're making retro games back to basically 1980. So we have been making retro games as long as we've been making the games we're retro of.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. just a perspective on that, right?
Yeah, that is. And one thing I think is worth acknowledging is that a retro game that is as clunky and as difficult in kind of the sheer kind of interface as a lot of those 80s games were. So some things like an original Pong cabinet is like, it's super smooth, right? It's like actually quite impressive. Whereas a game like Atari's Adventure, or almost anything on the Atari where you were like trying to jump or have anything that was particularly responsive, right. It was utterly painful for the most part. There are rare exceptions to this, right? And so something within this area of kind of retro, it's got all of the modern benefit of 4 decades of game interface design experience going for it.
Right. It's
very smooth to engage with. It's very intuitive. But I would honestly tell you, from my perspective, the thing that makes it good, and it makes it a good fit for me, it makes it, to come back to our initial point of departure about well-played games, this is a game that I naturally engage in a discourse with. Like, for whatever reasons, based on my prior play experiences, it's not a game that I struggled to kind of get on top of. I'm not like 5 or 20 hours behind the average player in terms of getting to a point of basic proficiency where it can feel smooth to play. And so that's key, right? It's a good game, in my opinion, because it's a game that suits me.
Right.
And a big part of that is the emergent mechanics. Like, I really like games where you don't know that you're looking for the next power up, or that you can kind of read the text and say like, oh, building this thing, this structure does a thing, but you don't necessarily know what that thing does, right? Like, it gives you the upgrade text, but looking at the tree, you can read into it, but and then some of these effects are completely not telegraphed at all, where it's like, oh, there are 2 random cards that are now spawning that I didn't even put into my card rotation, that are cool and novel and weird and reveal another corner of this universe as it was conceived of, that that I wouldn't have thought of, that I wouldn't have thought this was part of the design in terms of the world building that the game does. And then I throw on top of that the game does world building in a kind of funny way, because for all of its use of totally classic high fantasy tropes, it has some pretty significant departures. It's become a little bit, tired to say subverting expectations. But there are ways, even mechanically, that this game definitely subverts expectations. I'm not going to reveal specifically how, but in relation to how it leads towards its progression. You get to a point where you're going, okay, I think I know where this is going to go from here. And it's like, yeah, no, we're gonna go way off to the side over here instead. We're gonna do something that's kind of like a radical departure from what you would assume based off of the other tropes that we've laid down. Even something as simple as putting the vampires into play, and well, it's not unheard of within the fiction of this world. It goes, oh yeah, no, vampires were part of a healthy ecosystem in the before times, when the world was not a forgotten place that you're trying to pull out of the ether, right?
I have 2 follow-up questions. Out of everything that you just said, answering David's question about why is this game good? One question is, does a game need to be smooth and polished for it to be good? Like, would you be as compelled if the user interface just didn't work the way you wanted it to, or like if the sound effects weren't so well done, or the soundtrack wasn't so well done? So is that necessary? And then the second question about what's necessary: does it need to have something that you're not expecting?
Oh yeah. And this is for qualifying in terms of what makes the game good for me, right? Specifically. Right. Mm-hmm. In terms of this game, I think that it could afford a few nicks here or there in terms of the polish question, and it would still be a good game. But the game itself is so simple, right? In terms of if we're going to talk about the verbs, they're pretty minimal. You're dragging and placing some things. And while some of these are wind up being some fairly interesting, kind of can inform some interesting strategic approaches, that's not a huge amount of depth, right? And I think that in a game like that you can't afford, when you're not doing a lot, when you're doing basic moves, they need a lot of polish in order to really shine for me as a player anyway. I think that it's unforgiving. It's like as a musician, if you're performing solo, you don't have anyone else playing to cover up your mistakes. So if you make mistakes, your audience notices them a lot more, right? I think that in a game with relatively simple mechanics and they're sparse, actually less of the simplicity, but more the sparseness of them, very, very few mechanics. Or I should say very few verbs. It's maybe not fair to this game to say that it has few mechanics, because things really do layer on top of each other with increasing complexity. But that when you have such simple verbs that, like, if you don't get it right and it's not clean. I mean, actually, I was just playing on trackpad briefly the other day so that I could share with a friend where I was at in the game, and I was like, oh my God, this is miserable. I don't know if I would have gotten this far in this game, at least at this age, trying to play it on trackpad. I mean, I certainly would have had to like change the sensitivity on my trackpad to a point where it'd be unusable for most other things. So that was the polished part. What was the second part?
So you said that, there's things that you weren't expecting in terms
of,
right. Genre conventions or whatever, or even story conventions, right? Like the vampires and all that stuff. So
yeah. I mean, so I don't think that for me is as necessary. I think for me as a gamer, and even with media more broadly, letting genre conventions play out in the expected way, it can be totally fine if you're doing it well. It can really be, that can be a situation of like, yeah, we all know the moves. Yeah, it's a high fantasy story about a young person who's extraordinary and they don't know it yet, et cetera, right? Like, if you do that really well, it can still be a great story. And there's no way that, as a guy in my 40s, that I'm going to expect to be particularly surprised by much in most of the genre fiction that I enjoy, regardless of the media that it's being presented in, right? Mm-hmm. Which, perhaps reflects on research. We can come back to that in a second.
One of the things
David.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of I feel like I've noticed in games that really rely on genre. This game, even things like stacking Counter-Strike or Counter, whatever you call it, or stacking vampirism, right? Those are genre tropes. There are mathematical reasons why those genre tropes tend to happen and tend to work.
Absolutely.
But that there is vampirism called vampirism, right?
Right.
We knew what that meant because we played these kind of games. At least the three of us did, right? And you could pretty quickly figure out what it means, probably, without a lot of explanation. Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of explanation, right, about what any of those meant. Having vampires, having harpies, having things that are relatively familiar, in a kind of goblins, right, genre dependent way, allows the player, it feels, to have some agency in how they construct meaning in the game.
Definitely.
They know the nouns, they know the verbs, they know the grammar a little bit. So now they can actually make sentences of meaning, to get, go way out on a limb here. You're making so few choices in the game, but it seems at any given time, right?
Yeah.
The verbs. But you're participating in a story, it seems, and the story is developing, and the interest lies in understanding at least having something that you understand as the basis. I did not expect Loop Hero to be, for whatever reason, I expected it to be modern.
Yeah.
Probably minimal advertising would have cleared that up for me.
Sure.
But being familiar with the fantasy genre, the fantasy tropes, the minute that I saw, you're walking around in a sword with, a sword and a shield and armor, and then you're encountering vampires and goblins, I'm settled into a pattern of what I expect. And Absolutely. Now you can surprise me.
Yeah.
Because I know what to pay attention to and I know what to ignore. And if you actually change what I think should be, I'm going to notice. If everything is chaos, then, if everything is new and everything is chaos, then you don't have any basis on which to form a pattern of understanding, so that when you see variations that are interesting, you probably don't even notice them.
I find this to be a nice hook back to our discussion about, the game studies grad student and taxonomies of games. And this is, from a design perspective or from an analysis perspective, what you wind up arriving at after one's fruitless taxonomy attempts to go like, oh, right, you know what, trying to taxonomize.
I'm still making the perfect taxonomy.
Yeah, right. No, like trying to taxonomize all of this doesn't do me that much good. But I have now reshaped my orientation to what game genres mean, and how I can use them, or how they are being used by other designers to create the experience that's being designed, right?
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of Eric Zimmerman has a video on YouTube about every game is a language.
Yeah.
I think that's the name of the video. It basically saying the exact same thing that David just said, which is like there's a grammar to particular genres, and as you become familiar with them, the novel things that happen, or as you sort of like, I guess, become experienced with a particular genre, then it's these novel things that come up that sort of delight you and everything.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you have to establish those genres, right? You have to actually fit into the genre before those novel things are novel.
Right.
They have to be novel within the genre, right? Yeah.
I think it's kind of partly why some people don't like Quentin Tarantino movies. Because if they're not familiar with the particular genre that he's riffing off of, then they're not going to appreciate his movies as much as like somebody who's like, if you're really into kung fu movies, for example, and then you watch Kill Bill, you're going to see certain things that are like, oh, that's really interesting. Whereas if you're not into kung fu movies and you see Kill Bill, you're just like, God damn, this is just really violent,
I thought people didn't like him in part because they were excessively and joyfully violent.
Well, and other people don't like him in part because he's absolutely abusive, but that's another story entirely.
Well, right. There's that.
Yeah. But you get what I mean in terms of.
He understands the genres that he's speaking to, right? He's a director that gets the genres he's speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like him because of how he acts, then somebody out there who is a decent human being should absolutely do a better job. And I would love to see their movies.
There you go. We're on this tangent, I will say that one quirk of being in Los Angeles, one of my faculty knew Quentin when he was working at the local video store.
The Blockbuster or whatever it was, yeah.
It wasn't a Blockbuster, right?
Yeah,
it was
some local chain, yeah.
Some local chain, or maybe even a local one-off, I think in Redondo Beach or something. And and it's like you get that kind of context. You can get that kind of context about anyone when you have that little window and you go like, oh, right, you've just always been a geek about this. And it's no wonder that you engage in your medium the way that you do. Which again also reflects, I would argue, each of us in terms of what we've chosen to research in games over the years.
Absolutely.
No wonder that we wind up choosing, it's no wonder that you wind up getting involved in games research. You have to be, for the most part, you're enough of a geek in that way to find that to be compelling, and then decide whether or not you want to ruin it for yourself.
Yeah, I would hope that's kind of true of anyone who's gotten a higher ed degree, I think. Or I would hope that if you become like a mechanical engineer, that you're really into that.
I think there are very few terminal degrees where we can make a pretty clear case that not everyone who gets that degree is deeply into it, and those are the ones that are associated with high salaries.
Fair.
Though it is possible to get through it and no longer be interested in it for the reason you got into it for.
That's true.
Right. I think that often happens, right? And
absolutely true.
Yeah.
Well, this comes back to seeing the horizon, which we've covered previously, right? But you can, to put it less elegantly, you can hit burnout.
Another thing we were talking about a little bit is this, engaging with media at multiple different tiers, right? You can engage with this game really without knowing any of those conventions at all that we were talking about. Definitely. You could be a real new person walking into this space. None of us are new, so I can't say this for certain, but I imagine you can figure out the verbs. You can figure out what you can do and can't do pretty quickly. Trial and error will at least let you play the game. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You might not appreciate some of the conversation around the game, but you're in the game. You're playing the game. You may not be in the conversation of the game, and you may not be really skilled yet to converse about the conversation of the game, kind of push back on the game during play. Mm-hmm. In these multiple levels of understanding your play as you're engaging in it. And that's fine, right? We don't have to all be critically approaching our play in this kind of critical theory way. But I do think there is something, what you were saying, like the surprisingly reflective aspect of the dialogue with the harpies, the dialogue with the even the goblins, right? Even if you come back to, we just are where we are, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Not going to argue with you on that one. Fine.
Honestly, I can't think of very many Dungeons and Dragons games where the DM has gone out of their way to kind of put the motivation behind goblins in a way that's like, unless they're trying to make their goblins special, right? Mm-hmm. So,
Right. And that there's a understanding. It doesn't just happen to be a retro game with a retro aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's actually in conversation with the media. It's in conversation with that retro aesthetic. You can participate in that level, or you can not and still enjoy the game, I think, and that's a pretty nice element of design. You know, that it offers this space of participation but doesn't require it.
Well, and so the recursive. Oh yeah, sorry, Mark.
There's a YouTube channel, I guess, where it's like newbie plays, you know, or what does this game look like for a newcomer? I don't actually remember the phrasing, but it's an interesting watch because
have you ever taught people? I don't know if you. I know Moses has been around this. Mark, you probably have too. If you introduce like World of Warcraft, we introduced World of Warcraft to a lot of teachers that had never played any video games whatsoever.
Oh yeah.
And it is shocking how much of the grammar of video games we assume everyone knows, because if you've played enough games, it's just second nature. But how to read how to move around in three-dimensional space is by no means intuitive.
Right.
Yeah. How to even like, you know, not look up in the sky all the time if that's possible, or, you know, wander around in circles without intending to, or whatever, is just, you know, that there's so much about it that is second nature because we've made it second nature to ourselves.
Well, then certain things that are second nature to us shoot us in the foot when we encounter a thing like Second Life that doesn't act the way we think it's going to act. Like you don't navigate in Second Life with the WASD keys, and or at least not the earlier versions of Second Life, and so that always threw me off. You know.
Yeah.
Even
Lineage too, like the click to move. You know, some of the other, they're totally game conceits in that case, but Second Life was made by people who didn't really do games, right? They weren't really making a game. They weren't wanting to make a game.
Yeah, they weren't. They were making just this virtual. I was about to say virtual reality, but that means a different thing these days.
It does.
Right.
It does. But technically,
a virtual world.
Right. Yep.
So what I was going to say to hook back is that at a level of recursion, there's something interesting going on with Loop Hero as its own loop within the tropes that we're talking about, within the genre conventions that we're talking about, especially, and David, I hadn't necessarily thought about it, but in the way that you framed it, I don't know to the extent to which the developers are talking back to, you know, to the game's precedents.
I'm sorry, you're about to be I'm distracted from the important thing you're saying here. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they have there's a reason the door is closed at the moment.
Yeah, right. Mine was, but she pushed her way out.
I decided feline intervention wasn't going to happen right now.
Start that idea over, though.
I will. I don't know to the extent to which the game's developers were thinking about this, but that Loop Hero is itself engaged in a recursive discourse with the games that have come before it, right? Not just mechanically, but much more broadly in terms of the RPG, you know, digital game genre, which I mean, obviously can hook back into paper and pen and paper and dice as well. But even without going there, as you were talking about, you know, the way that, you know, there are predictable names for the mechanics that stack, and that if it to some extent assumes a player who's going to be making those connections back, and to be able to kind of, it's a conversation that's picking up where it left off, which is, again, you know, you're waking up, the world is reset a little bit with each new high fantasy RPG mechanic based game. The world has reset a little bit. Here I am again as a hero with no tools in my, no armor, no whatever. No knowledge of what the specific story is and who's been wronged in what way and what needs to be set to right.
Right.
And, you know, and am I willing to sit in a corner and cry about it?
Right.
Or will I don the mantle of hero to do whatever the work is that's supposed to be done and discover whether or not I actually am?
I am. I mean, I'm probably just gonna have to play it and find out, but I'm struck by a couple things that they kind of drop as understood that I don't know that I take as understood at all. You are pretty the first real person you encounter who isn't trying to kill you. They point out that you go out and you can come back, but they're not doing that.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to save the world. You're taking it upon yourself to save the world from the very beginning. And, you know, there's this kind of agonistic hero trope that's being played out. You know, that I got all sorts of problems with, but on the other hand, if it's is definitely a part of the genre, and it may even be a part of the conversation, right? And I'm interested in seeing if that comes
I
comes
am
back.
not going to spoiler what I know, but I will tell you, since I haven't finished the game, I don't know entirely, but I know enough to tell you that yeah, they're very aware of what they're doing there.
Okay.
It's quite evident that they're aware of what they're doing there, and that there are reasons, some of which I have an inkling of, and some of which I don't. But you know, there is a point a few hours into playing this game where it really got its hooks into me.
Nice.
And you know how that goes.
Nice.
So I think I'm going to find out before too long, because it's not a super long game.
Right.
I think I'm like 8 hours of play or something into it.
It has sort of a Planescape or Disco Elysium feel, where like you have an amnesia and you've dealt with these people before, but you don't know it, but they remember you, you know.
Right.
And then part of playing Planescape is figuring out, like, how are you an asshole to this person? Right.
And what are you going to do about it?
Right.
If there's anything to do about it, which there isn't always.
So is that, I guess I shouldn't ask if it's like that, because I don't want to be spoiled, but that's what you're making me think of.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah, it's true. It would be totally reasonable if in the end you turned out to be the Lich.
I mean, it could be. If that's the case, I haven't gotten there yet.
Right. Or the cause of the Lich. I mean, I'm just saying the tropes are all in line, but it could be a lot of other things too.
Yeah. And again, all I'll say on that particular topic is that you know, if you decide to play it, you'll certainly find out more. And some of it you'll find out before too long. At which point the game really gets its hooks into you.
Right. Yeah. And if it doesn't, I mean, I think a game isn't successful if it doesn't at least identify that it's aware of. I get frustrated by games that are kind of hint at those kind of deeper conversations, but then don't actually show consistently that they're aware that they're in them.
Sure.
Right? They're aware that they exist, and they're kind of it's superficial, right? I want to feel deep. I want you to experience this as if it were deep, but we're not actually gonna go deep on this. We're not gonna have any kind of critical engagement with this at all. We're just doing it for the sake of, and that's almost worse than not doing it at all, to me. But you know, just because it feels like it's you know, it's entirely buying into a intellectual mystique without actually bothering to be intelligent about anything.
Like, do your homework, right?
Yeah, do your homework. Make a game. Intend something.
Yeah. It was kind of funny too. The notion about you know, not sure who you've pissed off, discovering who it is in your in your prior path, and this has me thinking again about the reason why this game wound its way into this particular you know, series of videos and conversation and reflection of I don't know. I think I personally had that experience at least once as a graduate student of only realizing after I was like, you know, waist deep in a discourse that I had walked into something where people had very strongly staked out positions already. This conversation really was not remotely new. And I can't help but assume, Mark, from, you know, and David, from what both of you have said in the previous part of the conversation, although Mark, I think you surfaced it first, that there are grad students continuing to do that at this very moment. Even as we're having this conversation, there's probably somebody wandering into a room that they did not realize, you know, had been, you know, this this argument at the bar
seems to happen on the Digra mailing list quite often, actually.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And hopefully we're not going to get in too much trouble with any of our colleagues for mentioning it, but it does.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the point in terms of this recursion, and why touch on it in the context of retrospecting well played. It's like the conversation keeps wending its way forward, and maybe some of the points are unresolvable, and we need to kind of be okay with that, and you know, have our peace with that, and say like, hey, here's another it's like opposing walls, which is a terrible metaphor, but of course I'm thinking about like building a research body and building a wall.
Yeah, but I'm not. All right, so on the one hand, I think some conversations are just worth having indefinitely.
Yeah.
And some conversations are worth stopping, no longer having, I think. And like getting to the point where you can no longer have that conversation. But you know, do we really need to commit genocide in order to feel safe? Well, okay, we had to have that conversation to a point, but can we stop now? Can we stop having that conversation?
Good idea to stop that conversation.
It'd be a good idea to stop that conversation, right? I'm taking it obviously, right? genocides continue to happen because people continue to feel like they have to make them happen in order to feel safe. But that seems like a profound ignorance, or worse. Yeah. I'm not going to then equate our holy wars with genocide, but too directly. But I do think there are some holy wars that we get into as scholars that are really, like, the end point can be there is no taxonomy of games that's going to carefully fit every game into a proper position, into a shelf where it belongs, and every game fits in only one shelf, and blah blah blah. Right? There's not going to ever be a taxonomy of anything, much less games. That's not how things work. The process of creating a taxonomy might be useful.
Mm-hmm.
It might reveal some things that are worth talking about, but it's what it reveals that's interesting, not the taxonomy itself. Okay, we can stop talking about what's the perfect taxonomy, and instead just put that conversation aside. Never have it again.
Right.
Once, with everyone else who's gotten to the point where we're done making the perfect taxonomy, right?
But
because there is no perfect.
But no one. But that's a conversation that has an indefinite end, because when we have had our fill, newer people haven't yet. You know what I mean?
Right. But there's a bit of power in being around for a while. What I'm going to say to you, through you, your students, and my students, and everyone else's students, is, great, have that conversation among yourselves, but don't try and drag everyone else into that conversation. Listen, especially without listening.
Yeah.
Right? Because probably we're going to somewhat dismissively say there is no perfect taxonomy, and it would be perfectly reasonable to ask in a polite manner, well, why? But your answer is probably going to be, well, try it. It's a useless effort, right? It's a useless effort because it makes a bunch of assumptions that are just incorrect, but you might have to either study a bunch or try it and really look at it and break down your own failures to figure out why there are assumptions. So it's in the same kind of way as it's important to not walk into every conversation assuming that everyone has to catch you up on the conversation to the point that they're at. That's really what I'm saying. You got to catch yourself up to the point where they're at. And there may be a reason that they put some of these conversations aside, because they're toxic, they're dangerous, forget dangerous. They're toxic, they're pointless, they make enemies without any real point to it. Or they just lead around in circles and waste a ton of time without any new ground being covered after you've got the basic idea, the basic understanding. But you do have to get that basic understanding, or else that conversation has a point. Why do you make the taxonomies? To show that there's no point in making taxonomies, but also to show that they can highlight things about games that are interesting. Right? There is a point. It's just not to make it perfect. It's to make it elucidative, right? We illustrate. We make things, I have no problem with taxonomies. I have no problem with kind of systematic breakdowns, as long as you don't mistake the system for reality, and instead see the system as a means of understanding, an expedient device, right? And I just stated a bunch of things that are probably going to spark holy wars and hatred.
No, that's great. That's great. But I think in the context of well played, it's actually a really coherent argument for why well played as a specific type of academic format is actually enduring. Not just that it has endured, but why it will continue to have value. I've reviewed for it over the years as well periodically, and a couple of times I've had to say, this is really the wrong fit for this journal. And typically when that happens, it's not like, yeah, you don't understand the game you're talking about well enough, or or you're not engaging at a deeply or sincerely, deep enough angle. It's almost always because somebody is trying to construct a theory of games or a theory of play, and that's not really what well played does. It's not what it's so good at. What it's so great at is, creating these instances of analysis, of creating I guess I'll call it more local or personal meaning, right? And sure, it can reach to existing, literary or ludic or whatnot theory, and people often do. They often find, various writers that they're going to want to engage in terms of how they're making sense of a specific game. But it's always about that specific game, and that's kind of beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Or it's about the author. Like for me, when I did the Fallout 4 Let's Play video, I think I learned I think I'm the only one who got anything out of that whole endeavor. First off,
Well, you'd never
right?
know, right? I mean, but I think you kind
Well,
of have to take it on faith that somebody else might find use in it. But go ahead and explain what you're
I
saying.
mean, I
Sorry.
can look at the YouTube views and see that not very many people have actually watched the video, right?
Mhm.
But that doesn't matter
Populated contents aren't everything.
because well, it doesn't matter because
Right.
I got something out of it, you know, and that was a better understanding of what I want out of a game. You know, I didn't know that the thesis that I made would even be the thing that I would say about this game, right? Until I started actually recording myself and then started actually playing the game and everything, trying to play it a certain way. I think, you know, I don't know. I grew as a gamer. So not even talking about scholarship or anything, but just understanding my own desires as I partake in this medium that we love, right? I think I understand more like what type of experience I'm actually seeking, just for having made that thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess my response to that would not be that, you know, I think I've actually am one of the people that saw that, and I may have even reviewed it. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with your assumption that it was not useful to anybody else, but or your assertion rather. But
Thank you.
yeah. But I mean, I understand where the humility comes from too, and the fact that we feel like we have to have reason to speak as academics, and much of the time, especially now, we feel like, and we are speaking to empty audiences, right? I mean, in times of COVID, we literally are sometimes speaking to, you know, they're not even videos. The videos aren't even on, so we're not even really sure we're talking to people.
Yeah.
But even before, right? I was never always sure how much engagement anybody had, live or remotely. So we've got to, you know, I think we have to have some humility, and I think we have to have some realism about what we're doing. But on the other hand, there's something really important about well-played journal, I think, and any journal, that its intent is to share. It is not to elucidate, and it is not to grow oneself.
Mm-hmm.
That may happen, and I'm glad it did. That's a really important part of the process, that you grew in the process. Really important. But it's not the point of dissemination, right? It's not the point of publication and something like that. The point is to share it and have other people have opportunities to grow. And I think if we lose sight of that, it becomes very self-indulgent, what we're doing. And I don't want us to, like, if we're not trying to make the world a better place, at least a better place in some small way, by bringing joy or bringing some kind of appreciation for the aesthetic into the world at the end of this video than we had at the beginning, I think we probably shouldn't have. We probably should have gotten together individually and had this conversation without disseminating it, right?
Yeah.
It's a little too self-indulgent. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things, right? I mean, I think sometimes it's really good to get together with your group, a little circle of people, and talk about games and how important they are and how interesting they are. But I do think as gatekeepers to a journal, our job is to see what has value beyond. You know, we're gatekeepers to the I don't know, as gatekeepers to publication, it's our job to kind of try and determine what has value beyond the creation of it initially, right? Value beyond the author. And we can't speak to the value to the author, but we can speak to the value beyond the author and whether it actually adds to the conversation that's happening. And in which case, I mean, I really like the fact that there are gatekeepers, that it is a peer-reviewed thing. We could just all have blog posts and blog up whatever we want all the time without any peer review whatsoever.
Right.
But this is a place where I can trust that some people have at least looked at this and said, I think this is actually going to be interesting to other people. And that's a good process, even though, and I don't think that's about being judged. I think sometimes I'm not actually a very good judge of whether what I produce is going to be very interesting to other people, including everything I'm saying right now, right? I'm not a good judge of that, but I'm going to put it in front of other people and let them judge that. Right. I'm gonna have this conversation with the two of you and let you judge that. I'm gonna let you guys edit this and decide what you want to keep and what you want to throw out, and that's great. That's great.
I feel the problem is we're going to want to keep most of it.
Well,
but that's a separate issue entirely.
Yeah, but then Drew will come back. Drew, will come back and say, "Well, you ought to cut some of this.
You really should cut some of that." Yeah, probably.
And he's doing his job, right?
And exactly in that same way. And actually, I mean, I would also throw this back your way as well, Mark, which is to say that you didn't engage in that project to learn about yourself as a gamer.
Right.
And that probably part of the value that it winds up having personally is it stems from the desire to share. You have something you want to explore and you want to share this. And that in turn gives back to yourself and your own understanding, right? I would certainly say that that's been my experience engaging with Well Played as well. Did I understand more about myself as a gamer after, speaking and writing about Super Meat Boy? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I was excited about what the game had to say about failure, which was why I wanted to share that with the audience in terms of how that particular set of experiences of failure and learning and how it works as an engine for learning, what it was that Super Meat Boy could do in that respect, even if its transferability to other areas is like incredibly limited, right? But it nonetheless was, to my thinking, an interesting point of reflection about play and learning through that particular kind of torture machine.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. As an educator, I would encourage people to make educational experiences that are based on games, but not that one. No. It might have worked really well. Just speaking to your transferability argument, right? It might work very well as a particular form of torture toward learning. Yeah. But that doesn't make it the ideal form of learning.
No, well, I would actually pretty much argue that the other Well Played that I did, Dark Souls, also is not necessarily a particularly good. It has a little bit more inspiration that educators could take from it as far as how it works as a teaching machine. Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot more, but
a lot more. I think a lot more, but I think
it's still not a model I would recommend most people to lean too heavily into.
And part of it is it has
perseverance.
Always be voluntary. Right. I mean, the minute we co-opt all these things into education, often we make them compulsory and we lose it. We forget that actually changes the context on all of this. Yeah. Right. You keep playing Dark Souls because you want to, and that wanting to can be really twisted because it hurts, but it is so compelling in another way that it might cause some people to want to continue doing it, and they continue because they want to, because there's something is drawing them forward. And education can absolutely learn from that. There should be things that are really hard that you will fail at over and over and over again, but it's so compelling that it will continue to drive you forward. But probably those things shouldn't be compulsory.
I would also argue that since we're all in that games and learning nexus, the other thing that you can look at Dark Souls and say, here's something that this does well is if you look at Dark Souls knowledge as its own discipline, as you expand further and further out, you get to look back into where you came from. And it's something that I would argue we often are really bad at, actually, in terms of course design or degree design, pathway design, to be able to say, like, what, both validating the sense of accomplishment of, look, I was there and now I'm here, but also that standing here over there has a different meaning than it did when I was standing over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Which brings us back to taxonomies. I have no problem with the person who is standing where they are making a taxonomy. Right. But it has a different meaning later on.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Looking back on that moment, looking back on the people that are in that moment, it's going to have you're going to have a different vantage point.
With each loop, you have a different vantage point.
That's right. And there isn't even one looping path. Right. So we all have different vantage points on each other. Right. Mm-hmm. From different experiences we've. One of the things that really is helpful is sometimes to have shared experiences so that we build some common conversation points together. So then our different perspectives, we actually have some coherent ways to bridge the divide between our experiences and talk about things. So even just this coming together, looking at a game together, talking about it together, the three of us have relatively similar experiences in some ways, and then very different ones in others. But those shared experiences of grad school, shared experiences of games and learning background, shared experiences of Well Played, give us some commonalities on which to have conversations that are really pretty broad, really pretty widespreading in terms of potential impact. And as incoherent as this may seem to somebody watching this later on, there's so much we're self-editing. So many tangents we could be going on that we're self-editing. I'm sure, right?
Although I'm going to insert the one that occurred to me a moment ago when you were talking about all the different loops, and I was like, rhizomes. Deleuze is calling, but I will not answer the call.
And if you'd like to find out more about that, read Deleuze.
Exactly.
12 years later, he'll be on it. Some indeterminate time later. Yeah.
Some loops take longer than others to achieve.
Some loops take longer than others.
Yeah.
All right, folks. This has legitimately been a lot of fun. I really like that that you invited me to come together and to come and do this with you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I feel like we should do a ending outro type of thing.
What would that be?
I don't know.
That's great. What would that be?
That's it. No, this is not an ongoing series. This is not a podcast or a let's play. So in fact, we're at a point of conclusion here.
Yeah. At least
David,
until such time as we decide we ought to get together and do something else. Some other one of us has a crazy idea for a new project.
Who knows? It may well spawn another project. But David, I do want to say thank you for joining us on the majority of this journey. I think that the conversation between the three of us has made both the reflections on the journal and the much further ranging reflections that we've gotten into about games we play in academia much richer.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks. And the two of you provided the opportunity, and it certainly would not have happened without you. And you bring all this insight and experience from your own backgrounds to it, and I really appreciate that you had the idea in the first place and that you carried it forward, made it happen.
Mark, thank you for pushing this notion of going because you and I touched base early on after the call went out, and you were like, "What if we did something a little different?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm down with that. Let's check with Drew. Drew, are you good with us doing something different?" And lo and behold, here we are. I think we're going to have to edit the. Well, there are several things that need editing, but the written piece will probably it really genuinely needs to account for this as a separate fourth part in this series of videos. But it's been a good dive, and as with Well Played in general, it leaves me with a lot to reflect on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next 10 years. I say that and then thinking, geez, I'm going to be really old.
That's cool.
Not as old as I am.
Let's do it again in 10 years.
What I will be. Yeah. 10 years. 10 years. It's amazing. I mean, 20 years ago was 2001. Right. The first real video games were, in late 60s, but not really. First real video games were in the 80s. Right. We're so much at the beginning still. We're in the beginning of the middle of this medium in its development. 10 years is going to see really cool things develop, right? Really cool new emergences of not just technology, but also ideas. If you imagined, if you can think back on 2000 to 2010, we were in such a rut of kind of regurgitating the same ideas. And then Steam and mobile stores and all these things just made it so much easier to get a game out the pipeline. And we had Undertale, and we had all of these games that were just, yes, they're flashbacks to, they're throwbacks in some ways, but they are radically different in what they're trying to do compared to kind of this regurgitating of old concepts that happened for those 10 years.
Right.
What are the next 10 years going to be like? I think it'll be really cool to find out.
Yeah. And hopefully to tie this back to the very first video, hopefully NPC behavior will be a little bit more believable.
Indeed.
That sounds like a longer conversation. All right, folks. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.